Before I begin, I just want you to know that I will be reading because they're my words, even though they're written, but they're written from the deepest part of my heart, and I don't want to miss anything. And sometimes when I get passionate, I forget to say what I really want to say. So if I cry, if I pause, if I tremble, just know it's real and it's me, okay? This is my story, and I'm finally giving myself permission to speak it fully. So I grew up being taught that saying God damn it or oh my God or Jesus Christ was taking the Lord's name in vain. That was the rule. Don't speak his name casually. Don't attach it to anger or frustration. Show respect with your words. But no one ever talked about what it meant to take God's name in vain with your actions. No one warned me how God's name could be used as a tool to justify harm, to silence people, to excuse injustice. Because the word vain doesn't just mean profanity. It means empty. It means hollow. It means performative. And now, after everything I've seen, I think we've been afraid of the wrong things all along. I've heard people say, I'll pray for you, when they really meant, I don't want to sit with you in your pain. I've heard it's all in God's plan, used to bypass accountability and to spiritualize suffering. I've heard thoughts and prayers offered in place of action, especially when people were begging for justice. I've seen people say, love the sinner, hate the sin, thinking it makes rejection sound righteous. But when someone's identity is what you're calling sin, and there's no way to separate the two, you're not hating a behavior, you're rejecting a person. I've heard come as you are sung from the pulpits with arms wide open, only to watch those arms fold tightly when someone didn't change fast enough, or cleanly enough, or straight enough. I've heard God accepts everyone from the same mouths that quietly decide who's truly worthy to belong. I've heard God is in control, used to justify an action, to excuse cruelty, to hand over human responsibility to divine will as if that settles the matter. I've heard we're all sinners, only God can judge, and forgive and move on. But too often those phrases are used when the person causing harm holds power, not when the person harmed needs to be heard. The forgiveness is rushed, the judgment is selective, and the healing is ignored. These aren't just empty phrases, they're shields, used to avoid discomfort, to spiritualize injustice, and to maintain power while appearing holy. And I say this not as someone standing apart, but as someone who believed it all, who taught it, who tried to live it. I believe that calling out someone's sin was how you showed love. I believe that obedience meant correction, that truth-telling meant accountability, but only for others. But something inside of me never settled, because if love demands that someone change before they belong, is it really love? If God accepts everyone, but only after they become someone else, what kind of acceptance is that? Still, I kept going. I led, I prayed, I served, I gave, I stayed. But something in me was slowly unraveling because I couldn't understand why I felt so disconnected in a place that promised connection. Over time, faith started to feel like performance, like pleasing the church mattered more than loving people, like love had to follow a script to be seen as holy. I didn't walk away in one moment. I left piece by piece. The first thing I left was fear. The fear that had been planted in me in God's name. Fear of punishment. Fear of hell. Fear of not being enough. The fear that kept me quiet, small, obedient, ashamed. That fear was not holy. That fear was not love. That fear was control. And using God's name to instill fear in his own people, that is taking God's name in vain. So yes, I left the church. I let go of the version of God that demanded fear instead of freedom. And what finally settled in my heart wasn't doctrine or theology. It was realizing that I didn't have to carry the shame that version of faith laid on me. Letting go didn't feel like rebellion. It felt like finally breathing. And if I sound emotional now, it's not because I walked away. It's because I'm still healing. Because the person I was taught to be, the one molded by guilt, by fear, by obligation, had to die for who I truly am to emerge. That unraveling, that's what you're hearing. Not regret, just release. I would rather sit in this grief honestly than keep performing someone else's version of peace. So no, I don't go to church anymore. I don't pray like I used to. I don't perform belief to make others comfortable. I want my children and my future grandchildren to remember me as someone who stood beside the ones the world called unworthy. Someone who didn't flinch at the messy parts of love. Someone who cared more about how people were treated than how people were labeled. And I want to say this clearly. I know there are Christians who live differently. I know that there are those who read the Bible through a lens of compassion and justice, who welcome the refugee, who fight for equity, who protect the marginalized, who love without agenda. If that's you, I see you. I honor you. This message is not for you. But if you ever said, well, that's not me, I invite you to look again, to hold up that mirror, because even if no one else knows how you vote, how you speak, what you stand for, or stay silent about, you do. And when harm is done in the name of faith and you stay silent or say, that's not how I believe, but continue to support the leaders, the systems, the language that perpetuate harm, then that is what you're aligning with. I'm not saying this to condemn you. I don't have that power. I'm saying it because I had to say it to myself first. Walking away wasn't a rejection of love. It was a return to it, to love without fear, to faith without shame, to compassion without conditions. Where do I stand now? I don't know exactly what I believe. I know there's something more, something sacred, something that connects us in ways I can't explain. Maybe that's God, maybe it's spirit, maybe it's something I haven't named yet. What I do know is that I'm still on this journey. At nearly 50 years old, my direction has changed. My soul is still moving, and I trust that matters. I'm not walking away from goodness. I'm walking towards it. Not goodness with rules, not goodness with gates, just goodness that needs a label. Just love. Messy, grounded, full-hearted love that sees people as they are and calls them worthy anyway. So yes, maybe it's still respectful not to say God damn or oh my God. Maybe that language still stings for some, but that's not what it really means to take the Lord's name in vain. The real violation is using God's name to excuse abuse, to silence the hurting, to justify cruelty, to elevate power, and to turn love into a weapon. That's the version of God people are walking away from. That's why I walked away. Not because I stopped believing in compassion, but because I couldn't keep pretending that the church I knew was rooted in it. It wasn't God who failed. It was how his name was used. That is the misuse. That is the fracture. That is the reason. And that's why so many of us are stepping back. Not because we've rejected goodness, but because we're trying to reclaim it. That's where I stand now. That's where I speak from. And that's where I find peace.